Can I ask you a very simple question?
I let you finish.
Go ahead, because I want you to ask. Say, was that in the JCPOA or not? Go ahead.
I let you finish. There we go. So that's in one of those points, right? Is that we don't get a nuclear weapon, a nuclear armed Iran. That was the one strategic objective the president had going into this, and that's victory. And so I don't know why.
Can I ask you a simple question? Was that in the JCPOA or not? Was it word for word or not?
Actually, Bakari, I'm glad you asked. The JCPOA actually just gave a landing strip for the Iranians
it literally
to
said
get
the
to a nuclear weapon.
So
it didn't. This is total and complete. We will not produce, and we will.
Hold on a second.
We will destroy our enriched uranium.
But hold on a second.
In today's video, Bakari Sellers calmly shreds Tim Parrish with facts on CNN's Newsnight. Since the US withdrew from the JCPOA, Iran has expanded its uranium enrichment and tensions in the region have only escalated. Now, after months of military action and shifting goals, Americans still don't have a clear answer on what success actually looks like. So let's dive in and watch how Bakari Sellers shuts down Tim Parrish on CNN's Newsnight.
The agreement between Iran and the United States has been released, and even allies of the president are trashing it. Quote, an American surrender, a grave capitulation, and the worst foreign policy blunder in decades.
We went into Iran and rescued a downed pilot. We had total control over that country. We were winning militarily and economically. And when you are in that position, you negotiate from strength. You don't give people money. You don't give them access. What are they going to do with the money, Sandra? You know that Iran is going to use this for nefarious purposes. We all know that. The regime has not changed.
The point I'll start from is this total mischaracterization that Donald Trump lost the war. First of all, the one objective, the strategic objective that the president was very clear about from day one was that we did not want them to procure a nuclear weapon. In that deal, one of those 14 points is Iran coming to the table and saying, we will not.
Can I ask you a very simple question?
I let you finish.
Go ahead, because I want you to ask. Say, was that in the JCPOA or not? Go ahead.
I let you finish. There we go. So that's in one of those points, right? Is that we don't get a nuclear weapon, a nuclear armed Iran. That was the one strategic objective the president had going into this, and that's victory. And so I don't know why.
Can I ask you a simple question? Was that in the JCPOA or not? Was it word for word or not?
Actually, Bakari, I'm glad you asked. The JCPOA actually just gave a landing strip for the Iranians
it literally said
to get to a nuclear weapon.
So
it didn't. This is total and complete. We will not produce, and we will.
Hold on a second.
We will destroy our enriched uranium.
But hold on a second. Hold on a second, Tim. And before you jump in, Stephen. Hold on. Before you jump in, Stephen. The JCPOA said that Iran would under no circumstances ever obtain a nuclear weapon. And in fact, this deal contemplates that, because what it says is that Iran reiterates what they say has been their longstanding stance, that they would not have a nuclear weapon. Now, I think what you're referring to is the fact that the JCPOA had sunset provisions for the limits that they had on nuclear enrichment. That is true.
That's right.
However, you also have to acknowledge that this deal has absolutely zero provisions when it comes to the fate of Iran's nuclear enrichment program and its nuclear weapons.
No, that's not true, Abby. This deal is performance-based.
But but what are the markers?
If the Iranians,
but what are the markers, Tim?
If the Iranians start producing a nuclear weapon again, if there's evidence of that, they have to allow the proper regulatory authorities in the country.
But hold on.
And if they report that something otherwise is happening, we'll pick back up.
But hold on a second. This deal doesn't say Iran will never be able to enrich uranium in its borders. You know what it says? It says that we'll determine at another date the fate of enrichment in Iran, which suggests that this deal is contemplating that Iran could enrich. Now, President Trump was even more explicit in an interview a couple of days ago with the New York Times, and he said, yeah, maybe we might have a cap. Maybe it's around 3%. The same cap that existed in the JCPOA. So look, I get the sunset provisions, but when you have a document that it basically says, we'll figure it out later, you can't tell me that those are benchmarks. That's just kicking the can down the road.
So I would say this, that I think it's false to say that.
For years, opponents of the JCPOA argued that it wasn't tough enough because of its sunset clauses. But it's important to remember what the deal accomplished in the short term. Under the agreement, Iran shipped out most of its enriched uranium stockpile, dismantled thousands of centrifuges, capped enrichment levels at 3.67%, and allowed extensive inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency. According to multiple IAEA reports, Iran was complying with those restrictions before the United States withdrew from the deal. After the withdrawal, Iran gradually reduced inspector access, expanded its stockpile, and increased uranium enrichment to 60% purity, far closer to weapons-grade material than anything allowed under the original agreement. Now, after months of military escalation, billions of dollars in cost, disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, and higher energy prices around the world, the administration appears to be moving back toward a framework built around these same core concepts: limits on enrichment, international inspections, and future negotiations. The difference is that this new agreement seems to leave many of the most important details unresolved. What are the exact limits on enrichment? What happens to Iran's existing stockpile? What inspection regime will be in place? What triggers sanctions if Iran violates the deal? And who determines whether Iran is complying? Those aren't minor details, they are the agreement. Foreign policy can't run on promises that critical issues will be worked out later. If the administration believes this deal is stronger than the JCPOA, it should explain exactly how, because right now it looks less like a new strategy and more like a return to the same approach, only after a much costlier and more dangerous path.
That they weren't developing nuclear weapons, because they were. So whatever Obama did, it certainly.
That's not what I said. In fact, to be completely clear, I said they were further. They're further. They were further away in 2015 than they are.
That's still not true. That part isn't true either.
So they were. We know that they were moving very aggressively ahead with developing a nuclear weapon, and that was one of the greatest dangers on the planet. So for you all to say he accomplished nothing, I think is absurd.
What did he accomplish?
We've moved them, and by the way, Trump has been very clear.
What did he accomplish? Be clear with, what did we accomplish?
We have denuclearized.
No, we have not.
Can we talk about
you
how
don't even
they
have
were
their nuclear.
sold?
There is no one. Based upon what? Based on what?
If they continue to try to develop a nuclear weapon, we will bomb them again.
Right.
Well, so because the bombing worked.
Well, one of the realities is the one difference right now, practically because of the bombing, is that currently, as far as we know, the centrifuges inside Iran are not spinning. That is to say, they were under Obama, and I agree with you. I think there was a lot of ambiguity, but I think that also, I think we should maybe just leave the JCPOA behind. I think it was part of a different world. For me, it was a world before October 7th. I've said this on this show before. Yeah. I think October 7th changed the rules of the game in the Middle East in terms of geopolitics. A JCPOA type agreement just cannot survive. In fact, the reason I think we got into this war, and as you know, I'm critical and agree with the president in terms of I think there was a strategic rationale for going in at some point, but I think that the execution and the planning was badly bungled, and we're paying the cost right now.
So one of the things, Keon, that we've talked about with you is the ballistic missile component of this. And I just want to play what the administration had been saying about ballistic missiles and what they're saying now. Listen.
They've already developed missiles that can threaten Europe and our bases overseas, and they're working to build missiles that will soon reach the United States of America.
We're going to destroy their Navy, we're going to destroy their Air Force, and we are going to significantly destroy their missile launchers so they can never hide behind these things to get a nuclear weapon.
This operation is a clear, devastating, decisive mission. Destroy the missile threat, destroy the Navy, no nukes.
Well, what am I going to do? Am I going to let Saudi Arabia have missiles, but they can't have them? Yes, sir. It doesn't work that way, you know? It doesn't work that way. And missiles aren't the problem. Missiles they hurt a little location, but they don't blow up the planet.
I mean, what can I tell you? It's planning and knowing to do to do the right thing is one thing, but knowing how to do it right is a different thing.
That's very true.
And I'm in the position that it was maybe it wasn't the right time to do it, but at some point I felt that the war was inevitable. And I think this is kicking down the can down the road, this agreement.
How has Trump,
At first, the goals sounded expansive. Stop Iran's nuclear program, eliminate its ballistic missile capabilities, weaken its regional proxies, and potentially create conditions for regime change. Now, the conversation has shifted to reopening the Strait of Hormuz, securing a temporary agreement, and hoping future negotiations address the details later. That's a significant change in objectives. Bakari Sellers and Kian Tajbakash are right to point out that we need to judge this strategy based on outcomes, not rhetoric. And the facts are complicated. Before the US withdrew from the JCPOA in 2018, the International Atomic Energy Agency repeatedly verified that Iran was complying with key restrictions on uranium enrichment, centrifuge use, and stockpile limits. Iran was not enriching uranium anywhere near today's levels. Since the US exit from the deal, Iran has expanded its enrichment program, accumulated large stockpiles of highly enriched uranium, and reduced access for international inspectors. That's not a political opinion, it's the reality documented by international monitors. At the same time, military action has clear limits. Airstrikes can damage facilities and temporarily disrupt operations, but they don't eliminate the scientific knowledge, technical expertise, or political motivations behind a nuclear program. History shows that lasting non-proliferation agreements require verification mechanisms, intrusive inspections, and clear enforcement measures. The administration's messaging on ballistic missiles also highlights a broader issue. If missiles were initially described as a central threat but are now treated as secondary, it raises questions about whether there was a coherent long-term strategy from the beginning. And while October 7th changed the geopolitical landscape, it didn't change the basic reality that diplomacy and military force need to work together, not substitute for one another. Americans deserve a clear answer. What exactly is the endgame? Because without defined objectives and measurable benchmarks, temporary tactical victories can quickly become long-term strategic failures.
The whole rationale, just to be clear, actually, even more so than the nuclear rationale, because last year when they did the bombing, it was actually to bury the nuclear material, right? The rationale for this operation was to take the ballistic missile threat off the table so that they could no longer use ballistic missiles as a shield for their nuclear program. Now you have the president saying, well, why can't they have ballistic missiles? Everybody else in the neighborhood has them. How do they justify that at this stage?
I think it just shows there was no clear objective from the beginning. I think the president and the administration sold this war in very large terms. And there's a middle ground. There are people who will say, look, we understand that Iran is a threat, but the president added so much to it. I mean, let's talk about, we're not even talking about the human rights element that was added at the beginning. Right. He created a moral argument for going into Iran. He wanted an entire regime change. And I would now ask, are the people in Iran safer, more freer, better off, or have we completely lost that because we used it?
The regime was killing thousands and thousands of people.
But the regime has the regime changed.
We cut off one head and another
No. The regime has not changed. It actually got younger and angrier, and they.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
But it's a theocracy, and you can't bomb your way to a democracy. It doesn't make sense.
But regime change was never this president's objective.
Yes, it was.
He literally said on the night of the
Israelis, maybe, but that was never one of the objectives of the president.
We've gone through this before. He said on the night of the bombing, the people of Iran, now is your time.
Now is your time.
You take back your country.
Correct.
He said then the next week. I want to have. He said on the next week. He said on the next week, I want to have a role in picking the next leader of Iran. I think I can be the one to do that because I've killed all the other ones.
At the beginning, Americans were told the mission was about eliminating Iran's ballistic missile threat, stopping its nuclear ambitions. weakening its regional proxies, and even creating the conditions for political change inside the country. Now, months later, those objectives appear far less clear. That's a problem because military action without a consistent endgame rarely delivers lasting results. History has shown that removing military capabilities is one thing. Transforming a political system is something entirely different. The United States spent nearly 2 decades in Afghanistan trying to build democratic institutions after toppling the Taliban, only to watch the Taliban return to power within days of the US withdrawal. Iraq offers another lesson. Removing a regime without a long-term political strategy can create instability that lasts for years. Iran presents an even more difficult challenge. It's a deeply entrenched theocracy with multiple power centers, including the supreme leader, the Revolutionary Guard, and religious institutions that don't simply disappear because military targets are destroyed. And that's why the mixed messaging matters. If ballistic missiles were once described as an existential threat tied directly to Iran's nuclear ambitions, it's difficult to understand why they're suddenly being treated as a secondary issue. The same goes for regime change. Whether or not it was formally written into a policy document, public statements encouraging Iranians to take back their country and discussing future leadership inevitably create expectations about political outcomes. But you can't bomb your way to democracy, and you can't create a stable government from the outside. Meanwhile, ordinary Americans are still paying the price through higher energy costs, increased military spending, and growing uncertainty about how this conflict ends. If the administration wants public support, it needs to clearly answer 3 basic questions. What is the objective? How will success be measured? And what is the exit strategy?